We're in our series about the fruit of the Spirit, and we're down to the last three, and we know love's going to be the last one. We've talked about this, so it's between kindness and goodness. And so today what I want to talk about is something that's become counterculture in America almost, and that's being kind. Truly, that's the way that our society has ended up in a lot of ways. It's not almost natural for us to be kind, and being kind is a big deal to God because God is kind. Everything we have in our lives is owed to the goodness and kindness of God. And so we're going to see what it means to be kind and live in a world where people are just bad-mannered and rude, sometimes uncivil. Sometimes they cut us off, both on the road and in the grocery store, and all other sorts of issues that we run into people that just seem unkind. And it's pretty easy to see this. Even in our political climate, it's pretty obvious. And I don't have to talk about Trump and Kamala. You know what was really shocking is the vice presidents had a debate, and you know what the big story out of that was? It wasn't what anybody said. It was the fact that they were nice to each other almost. And that was the story. Whoa, can you believe that they were kind? Wow, how did we get there? How did we get to this point? It's counterculture now to be kind in America. 1 Thessalonians 5:15 says, make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. It's become very countercultural. We have a lot of our idioms that now sound very unkind. It's a dog-eat-dog world. I got to look out for numero uno. That's not what God said. That is completely opposite to what he said. So today, as we look at the fruit of kindness, as we explore that, we're going to spend a little more time checking out our attitude, worrying less about looking nice, like we all try to look nice, and we're going to actually work on being nice. Colossians 3, chapter 3, verse 12, talks about God's chosen people, and it says that there's 5 things he tells us to clothe and put on. He says, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves. And he says 5 things: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and making sure you're always right. Hold up, wait, no, it says patience. Well, if we were to dress ourselves in those 5 traits, boy, we'd be dressed for success as Christians, wouldn't we? And isn't that the most important role and job that we have here? If we're going to be stressing about and worried about dressing for success, well, how does God tell us to dress and to be clothed? You know, we see this in Philippians 4:5. Let your kindness be known to all people. I wonder if we were to ask our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, is the first thing they're going to tell someone else about us is that we're kind? How far down the list will you have to go before they go, oh, and he's kind? David, he is kind sometimes. How far down the list do you have to go? But Paul says, let your kindness be known for your kindness. Some of your translations might say gentleness, same idea. The Greek word is epikasi. It means equitable. And equitable and equality is 2 different things. We talk about this sometimes. You see this in the political sphere happening now. Equitable equality is all about everybody gets the same. Equity is restoring people regardless of where they're starting from. This is in stark contrast to Phariseeism. This is where we're fulfilling the spirit of the law, not just the letters. Not always just being concerned with knowing what's right, but living what's right. And saying, great, you know your Bible, you know the scriptures, but are you walking with Jesus? Are you led by the Spirit? Do you have kindness? Is that what they know you for? Be known for that. God wants us to have a reputation for kindness. Wouldn't that be so great if Canyon Church was known as the kindest church in Orange County? We might sing off key, not that we did, not that we do, but if we did, that would be okay as long as we were known as being kind. That would be so much better. Same with our personal lives. When people talk about us, the first thing they should think of, man, they're so kind. This person is so kind. Wouldn't that be so beautiful? 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, do everything in love. David, I thought this sermon was on kindness, not love. Well, look at the relationship between love and kindness. Kindness is love in action. Kindness is love in action. Kindness is not just a feeling. You might have feelings that you say, oh, that's a kind feeling. But if you don't ever act on them, you're not kind. You might be polite, but if you don't actually have the actions to back up those thoughts, those beliefs, I'm sorry, you're not kind. It's not just something you feel towards someone, it's something you do for someone. It's an activity. Kindness is in love and action. Now, this is so important in our lives that Jesus tells us this famous parable that we all know. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? And just for a little background for those that maybe don't know or not totally sure, the Samaritans and the Jews lived in the same place in Palestine, same areas, more or less. They interacted with each other and hated each other. Truly hated. As I was doing my study preparing this, I came across a phrase. A common phrase in the days of Jesus was, it was better to be a dog than to be a Samaritan. They did not like each other, to say the least. A lot of bigotry, a lot of racism, a lot of animosity. Now, what Jesus is going to do here is he's going to turn the tables on these self-righteous Jews and paint the Samaritan as the good guy in his parable. He makes the bad guy essentially the Jews, and the hero their worst enemies, some of their worst enemies. And he doesn't do this to be politically correct, because he's not. He's not being politically correct. But he says in John 5:39, you think salvation is found in the scriptures. Then he kind of adds that you don't even know the Messiah when he stands in front of you. So Jesus has to paint this picture for these religious experts on what kindness looks like by using a man they would say was horrible, probably a sinner, to show them it's their lack of embodying kindness that's horrible. We're in Luke 10. Starting verse 25, it says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to have and inherit eternal life? That's a good question. How do we get salvation? That's a great question to ask God on earth. Jesus says, what is written in the law? How do you read it? The guy goes, oh, okay, cool, I got you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus goes, ding, ding, ding. Yep, you're right. Tell him what he's won, Johnny. Just a gold star. And that guy goes, well, I didn't come here for that reason, to hear that I'm right. Because look at verse 29. He wanted to justify himself. Oh, so he asked Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? What's going on here? This guy's basically telling Jesus, are you serious? My neighbor? You surely can't mean the sinner down the street, the jerk that lives next door to me. You can't possibly mean those people, those heretics, right? Surely you don't mean that when you say, love your neighbor. Everybody, what's he doing? He's looking for a loophole. He's looking for a side exit to this command. Like we've never done that with God. God says, this is what I want you to do. And we go, well, but is there a loophole here? Do I have to love this person? What if they're wrong about something? Do I still have to be kind to them? Maybe I could just hit them with the hard truths, really show them the points where they're wrong, maybe even nitpick a little here and there. And that's the way I show kindness and love, by helping them be a better person. Isn't that loving too? That's how they would have seen it. Who's my neighbor, Jesus? What do you mean? So Jesus just starts right into the parable. It's right into the parable. He says there's a man going from Jericho to Jerusalem, And if you've ever seen this road, it's very windy, very mountainous. It'd be like going down Big Bear, those curves that go back and forth. Lots of hidden nooks and crannies and rocks and just ways to hide. And so what would happen is people would get robbed and beaten and assaulted. And he says, this happened. This happened to this man. But 3 people come by. He says each one of these people basically embodies an attitude. And we're going to look at every single one of those people and those attitudes. But I want to say before I start, before you start thinking, oh, I'm just a good Samaritan. Or maybe I'm mainly, I think what I would say is that we embody all 3 of these types of behaviors and attitudes every day. Sometimes I'm the good Samaritan part of the day, and then part of the day I might slide into person number 2's attitude. And then maybe person number 1's, or maybe I'm mainly person number 1, and on the rare occasion I become the good Samaritan. So let's look at those attitudes. The first guy, he's a priest. He's a priest. And he has this attitude of avoidance. It says that a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed on the other side. That is the attitude of avoidance. If I don't pay attention, well, that's not my responsibility then. Sees a guy bleeding and, oh, nope, I don't know. I'm on my way. I'm busy. I'll move to the other side of the road. Ignore this. I don't want time for this. I'm not responsible. And a lot of people live this way. A lot of people in our country, in our state, in our time, we're busy. We're on the go. It's kind of if I'm not too close, well, then that's not really my responsibility. We keep our relationships real shallow. And then we're not responsible for any pain because, well, we don't know about it. Maybe we're doing that intentionally or not, but the truth is the same, that once we do get close and start spending time with people, giving them the time that God tells us to give them, then we're going to see their pain and their hurts and their hang-ups. And then God calls us to show kindness. Instead, we stick to our own business. We could avoid a whole lot of hurt that way. Did you guys know that in California, there's 6 million people living below the poverty line? 6 million, just in California alone. That's bigger than most states. Now, you might be saying, well, David, yeah, sure, that's LA. That's not really my community. Okay, cool, let's pull on that thread. This church is your community, right? We all agree that this church is more or less in our communities. Did you know at the Orange Unified School District that 60% of all students live below the poverty line in the community that this church sits in? The actual number is 58.4 for my statistician over there. It's basically 60%. And I got that number from the district, from my friends who work there. That is the actual number. So why don't we see this? Why do we know about this? Again, most of the time, it's because we're just on the other side of the road. It's easier to live that way. The avoidance lifestyle. I'm going to keep my distance. When I see somebody in pain, I'm just going to keep walking over here. I'm preoccupied, whatever it is. And the other thing is maybe I just don't know how to help. Maybe that's the problem, is I don't know how to help. And again, it boils down to being on the other side of the road, because this side of the road says, well, I got to learn how to help. I got to learn where I can get involved. So it's easier. You can even spin it any way you want. I'm a priest. I'm a man. I'm a busy man about the Lord's work. I don't have time for these people. Now, the second attitude represents the second guy. And he's kind of, I'll describe it as this. He's caring, he's curious, but uncaring. Right? We see that. So too a Levite, when he came to the place, saw him and passed by on the other side. So maybe he came to the place, he's a little more interested, but he's still maybe not indifference or avoidance. On some level, yes, but I'd say he's got the attitude of apathy. Just indifference. One of the phrases I've learned recently, or this idea, is that the opposite of love isn't necessarily hate. It's indifference. And that might sound like, whoa, Dave, the opposite of love is definitely hate. No, the opposite of love would be indifference. You look at the 7 letters to the churches in Revelation. Who got it the worst? Who got the talking to the worst? The church at Laodicea. The church at Laodicea. Now, did they hate God and hate Jesus? No. But did their love inspire and move them enough to care to make a difference? No. No, it did not. They were apathetic in their faith. And what does Jesus say to them? Since you are neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth, insinuating that love and indifference are incompatible. That guy's interesting. He goes, I'm going to go out of my way. I see him, but I'm just going to avoid this. But what's really interesting to me is Jesus chose a priest and a Levite who would have potentially worked with the temple. He would have been a religious person in his own right. Why did he do those? Of all the tribes he could have picked, he picked a Levite and a priest. I think the point that Jesus is trying to make here is being religious doesn't make you kind. Just being religious doesn't make you kind. You could go to church all your life and be a miserable person just with other people. Some of the most unkind people I've ever met were church attendees. I'm not going to name any names, but you could read the word every single day, have it memorized, be in it every single day, telling people every single day, I read my Bible every day. That is good. That is a good thing. But do people know you're a Christian because you read your Bible, or do people know you're a disciple of Christ because you imitate Jesus Christ? Because nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Being a religious person doesn't make you kind. You might say, well, David, I'm not that person who doesn't stop, and I wouldn't just be curious. How many of you slow down at accidents to see what's going on? And the funny thing is for me, it's ironic, is I'm complaining and complaining. Why won't they just go? It's someone who needs a tire change. It's a fender. It's nothing. But then when it's my turn to get up there, I'm doing the same thing. Whoa, did you see that? Their whole tire flew off the other side of the road. Ooh. Now, I get it. I'm not a mechanic. You certainly would not want me to come and work on your engine or your car, because I'm the type of person who, once they fix something, I end up with more parts than I started that are just left over, and I don't know where this goes. But on the other hand, too, I'm not a medic. So me just stop, maybe that's going to cause a problem. That might not be able to help. Okay. Do I stop and pray? Do I turn off the radio and go to God on their behalf, that maybe he would provide them some comfort or peace, or that this situation might end up being to his glory? Do I do that? No, I don't. Curiosity stares, but kindness stops, either to help or to go to God on their behalf. I've heard that people say, this is the common phrase now that you say, that people go, we need to study Jesus' steps. We need to follow in the steps of Jesus. I'm wondering if we start studying the stops of Jesus. What did Jesus allow to interrupt him? What was he willing to stop for? Because, ironically, the Bible, when it comes to the miracles in the gospel, almost every one happens as a result of an interruption. What stopped Jesus? What stops you in the middle of your busy life to care and be kind for someone else? And as a believer, I'm told I can't hate anybody. It's insisted by God that I be kind to everyone. I don't have to approve of everything they do. I don't have to agree with them on everything. They might not even like me. I mean, that's probably possible. But I have to show them kindness anyways. We could be that first guy who's distant and avoiding things. We could be the second guy who's uncaring, not sympathetic. Or we can be the Good Samaritan, where we see kindness becoming love in action. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. Now, guys, this would have been someone who despised the Samaritan, and the Samaritan probably despised too. This would be like a Jewish person during World War II stopping to help an injured Nazi. Filled with pity. That's the heart of kindness. So how do we become a kinder person? How can you become a kinder man, a kinder woman? How do we end up being known for our kindness? And I'd say this passage offers about three, maybe probably more, but we're going to look at three real quick, powerful truths. Number one, it starts with your vision. It starts with you looking at the world around you. First, you must see the needs of those around you. The first thing the Good Samaritan does is he observes, he looks, he notices, he's aware. It starts by seeing. Love begins with looking, sensitivity begins with seeing. You can't care until you are first aware. And kindness is not always just seeing their faults so that we can go and hit them with the truth, give them the hard truth, tell them about all their life choices they're making wrong. How do I know that? Well, it doesn't say that the Samaritan went down to help the man and he started off by giving him a lecture. You should treat my people better. This serves you right. That's not how he starts. He goes straight into kindness. The kindness Jesus talks about starts with our eyes. We can see people's pain. You can't meet a need until you first see a need. People in this room are hurting. People in your lives are wounded. Why? Well, because everyone has wounds. Nobody gets through life unscathed. We all have our injuries, our hang-ups, our wounds. It's emotional, it could be relational, it could be financial, spiritual, church hurt wounds where the church members or the church has been the cause of pain in these people's lives. Whatever it is, we've got to start seeing it. We've got to start noticing it. And the truth is, well, we don't see the wounds around us very well. Why? Well, because we're good at hiding them. That's true. We're good at hiding our hurts, putting on a brave face. And the other thing is we're kind of always in a hurry. That's just kind of the truth there. You definitely won't see it if you're in a hurry. Hurry is the death of kindness. When I'm slowing down, I could be a lot kinder. I, for some reason, make a lot of friends at every restaurant I go to. It's just something I can't help myself. And just this last week when we were out with the Shides after dinner, I made them wait outside so I could get the manager and tell the manager what a great job our waitress had done. So proud of, it was just such an honor to this restaurant. I had to let him know. How could I do that? We weren't in a hurry. We weren't in a hurry. Hurry is the death of kindness. The slower I go, the more I can see. Can't be bothered if you're busy. You've got your problems, I've got mine. I'm in a hurry. This summer, we took our kids to Colorado. And I told Tamara, I don't want to fly. First of all, the cost of it is insane. But I want to drive. I want our kids to see all of this stuff. When you're flying at 30,000 feet in the air, going hundreds of miles per hour, yeah, you can see a little, maybe if you have a window seat. But not really. We saw so many things. And if I really wanted them to see things, we'd ride a bike. And if I really, really wanted them to see things and get to experience the bug bites and the sunburns, well, we'd walk. We'd see it all, wouldn't we? Because the slower you go, the more you can see, the more kindness you can give. So we ask God, give us a spiritual radar. Help me see people the way you see them. Help me to see people that you're asking me to be kind to. I'm here for that. Number 2, we've got to be sympathetic. I have to sympathize with others. I have to see their pain. Kindness is sympathizing with the pain. It's not just enough to know people are hurt and that they have needs. We have to feel those emotions too. The Samaritan said that it says that he had pity. Well, you feel pity. You feel that. We talked about this a few weeks ago, mirror neurons, right? And I showed you guys how that worked by yawning, and a lot of you were like, I'm not going to yawn. You guys sat here for a long time. I'm not going to do that again. But God gave us those mirror neurons for a reason. He had a plan so that we could feel each other's pain and then from that love and serve each other. God wired us with this ability. Don't shut it down. Your heart must be filled with compassion. How do I become a more sympathetic person? Here it is. You may want to write it down. I tried to put it in bold letters, should have made it bigger. Listen better. You want to be more sympathetic? Zip it. Learn to listen. You see with your eyes, but you sympathize with your ears. Your ears are some of the greatest healing tools you have. People can actually be healed by just having someone listen to them. If I could go back in time and tell young David that to just shut up and let Tamara talk about her problems. You don't have to fix them all the time. Sometimes she just wants to talk. Man, she was so patient with me because that took a long time for me to stop and figure that out. How many of us have a response to people who are telling us about their pain before we let them finish telling us about their pain like some sort of word vomit advice? Well, I know what you should do. Oh, thank you. Talk to someone who's lost a spouse or lost a child, anyone who's gone through something traumatic in their life, and you're going to hear so often that one of the best things that helped them was having someone just sit and listen and be with them. Greg Roten did our podcast recently, and he talked about the loss of his first wife, Leah. And he said, all these people came out to help, and I couldn't possibly mention all the people, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by mentioning them and leaving them out. There was just so many people. But you know what? As he kept telling his story, he did mention one person. Not by name, but he mentioned one person. And he said this one person came over, and all they did was sit with him. He said, I didn't say anything. He said, I can't tell you how much that helped to just have someone be there. We've got to stop talking and just hear. A fundamental need when it comes to mental health is to be understood. That's what makes Jesus so powerful. He came here. He experienced it. He understands. He's felt it. He's been through it. He knows, and he'll listen. If we can just stop and listen, you're going to give someone an enormous gift in healing. And maybe it's hard sometimes to stop and listen and hear someone who might be unkind themselves or someone who you don't agree with their lives, and just to stop and listen. And we need to stop asking this question of what's wrong with them, and instead start asking what have they been through. Sawyer and I, we go to these doctor's visits. We've got one coming up on Tuesday. And he's hard for the nurses and doctors there a little bit because of this things that he does. He covers his nose, and he starts going, do you guys have needles here? Do you guys have tubes? And the new nurses and doctors are like, why is he doing that? Like, what is going on? Well, he's doing that because for him, he's not worried about a shot. He's worried about these doctors needing to find an IV that will stick in his arm. And sometimes that's taken an hour of them digging in his flesh to find a vein that will stick while he's crying and screaming to beg them to stop. It's not a needle for a shot. It's a needle for a different reason. He's talking about the tubes because, man, they put tubes all in him. But he's covering his nose because his least favorite tube is the one they shove up his nose, make him swallow to go down his throat and get into his stomach, to either feed him because he can't eat anymore because his bowels are closed up, or to pump in medicine that he can't drink fast enough that's going to just flush him out. A lot of us are walking through life worried about needles too, covering our own noses. And it's not what's wrong with us. It's what have we been through? How did we get there? That way we can give grace and celebrate the arrival to where they're at now. It's not the right question, what's wrong with you? Galatians 6:2 says this. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. How'd this start? How'd this parable start? What's the greatest law? Jesus tells them. And here we see we carry each other's burdens. That's how we're going to fulfill the law. Well, as we'll wrap up, that third thing, the Samaritan, look what he does. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put this man on a donkey, on his own donkey, brought him to the inn, and took care of him. Oil and wine, that sounds more like a salad dressing. It's because it was. This would have been his meal. He's using his stuff on him. He doesn't have an ancient first aid kit that he's pulling out of his satchel, his donkey. No. He's pulling what he has. He's using the wine that he has to disinfect and clean this man's wounds and the oil to soothe them. Well, then he's got his bandages. Where do you think he got those from? You ever considered this? Where do you get the bandages from? Tearing his own clothes to bandage this man who hates him. Hates him. At no point does he stop and say, I'm busy, I've got a big presentation that I've got to get to in Jerusalem, I don't have time for this. At no point does he stop and say, what if this is a trap? What if they're waiting for me to help this guy? At no point does he stop and say, well, what if while I'm helping him, some other Jews come and think I did this to this guy? He doesn't stop and say, well, what if he wakes up, sees I'm a Samaritan, and wants to fight me? No. He takes action. Kindness lets us interrupt our lives. This had to be interrupting his whole day. Love takes time. When you're kind to others, sometimes it means your schedule is going down the drain. It's been thrown out the window. It's just the way it is. There is a price tag to kindness. We've got to seize the moment and pay that price. It's kind of the principle of sacrifice. A lot of times, sacrifice of our time can be a sacrifice of money, most certainly a sacrifice of your energy and attention, and maybe even a sacrifice of our reputation. Oh, David, why are you helping that guy? Do you know what he's done? Do you know who he is? Jesus wasn't worried about his reputation when he loved and served others. And remember, this is a story being told to a question that was asked. Who am I supposed to love? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus asked, well, who do you suppose showed love here? What does the guy say? Well, I suppose the one who showed him mercy, the one who was kind, the one who was loving. And Jesus doesn't say, duh. No, he says, go and do the same. Be like a Samaritan. Ooh. Not the religious priest. Not the one who's in the hurry. Be the Samaritan. Do kind things and expect nothing in return. How many of you last week, when I asked the faithful, went and found somebody to tell them that God is faithful? Went and looked for somebody who was hurting, who was in need, and told them, hey, God's still good. God is faithful. Anybody wonder why I tacked that on the end of that sermon? It's so when we got to this point, I could say maybe we've missed the boat sometimes on kindness. That even in a week, we might not have been able to find that person because we're not looking. Why do we be kind? Because God has been kind to us. He saved us through faith as an act of kindness. So if you haven't been baptized and are now ready to share in the inheritance that God gives us out of his own kindness, let's do it. We have water ready. We would love nothing more than to be there with you and watch as you commit your life to God, to Jesus Christ. If anyone is in need of kindness today, for any sort of hurt or hang up, we're here. We want to listen. My schedule's not that important. Tamara would disagree, but I have the time. The elders have the time. There are people here that would love nothing more than to give you some of their time. Why don't you come as we stand and sing?